Hello, and welcome to the Wallfacer Labs podcast. Today's guest is Piotr from L2BEAT. L2BEAT is the Ethereum Space's go-to resource for analytics on L2 scaling solutions. In addition, Piotr has several years of experience working as a software engineer and leading engineering teams in the Ethereum ecosystem. Piotr, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I guess before we kind of get into L2BEAT, which I'm sure a lot of people will be somewhat familiar with, I would love to understand how you got started in crypto. What was your initial touch point getting into the industry?
Great question. I guess it all started around 2017, 2018. I was still studying back then, and I remember, and I guess this is going to be a story for a lot of people. Well, they saw the price, right? So I was sitting, I distinctly remember sitting at my university and looking, and it's going up and going up and going up. And so I thought, that is probably interesting. So I got into it, Bitcoin initially, but what drew me very fast to Ethereum was the fact that it was focused on developers, right? You had smart contracts. That's basically it at that point. I learned Solidity, and the first thing I did was I thought, those crypto kitties, right, were cool. Maybe I can do something like this on my own. So I got together with a group of friends and we planned to do a card game where each card you would face off against an opponent. And because it's on the blockchain, you don't have the ability, nowadays people do stuff like this, but back then the thinking was, it has to be async. It cannot be real time. So the idea was that both you and your opponents pre-commit to a series of moves. So for example, high kick, low kick, and a blaster shot, something like this. And you would have cards and all of this fun stuff. Now, the problem was not with the idea or with technical skills. I guess I had both, right? The problem was at the time with my business skills. Meaning that I wasn't experienced enough to manage the team. I wasn't experienced enough to manage expectations. And overall, after 2 or 3 months into it, we decided to call it quits on the project. Which, looking back on it, if I just focused more, then this might have been a big thing, because there weren't a lot of things like this back then. Nevertheless, with the experience that I got, I met Marek Kirejczyk, who was the founder of ETHWorks, a software house that did some Ethereum stuff. So I joined there as an engineer and quickly progressed there from just being an engineer there to being responsible for projects there, helping everyone around. And at some point, I just decided, okay, I learned what I could have learned, and now it's time to do something on my own. So that's kind of the story, and right now, it's L2BEAT.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think maybe last time we spoke, I mentioned to you there was this crypto game that I kind of like right now that has a card element to it, kind of a turn-based thing. But just overall, it seems like the kind of gaming or turn-based move stuff in crypto is pretty fun. Any, if you were going to go back and try and, not that you would now, but try and start a game like that again, what lessons maybe do you think you would take, or what elements would you try to incorporate that are maybe uniquely crypto enabled?
Yeah, my thinking kind of changed from back then. So back then I thought because you got to also remember at that point, CryptoKitties was it. This was the game, and the game was basically you just take 2 kitties and you get a new kitty. So not much game, right? And I thought, you can increase the immersion or fun factor by just adding some new mechanics, which at that point was the turn-based battles or something. Right now, people have tried all of this, and it's big for different reasons. And from my understanding, crypto gaming is big because in third world countries, you can basically make a salary by farming those games. And then people from first world countries buy the items from the people from third world countries, which provides their income for their families. But people are not really playing the games because they like the gameplay, right? They're playing the games for some other motive. So for some people it's work, for other people it's entertainment, but they have to pay a lot for it. And this is not really what interests me at the moment, doing stuff like this. But at the time it was motivated by fun. And I think if I were to do something similar right now, like I would try to come up with something that's simply fun. And maybe that would mean that the game like has no financial component whatsoever.
Interesting. So maybe some kind of element of ownership, but less focused on the financialization. I guess I get that from the fun perspective of the game. So one more thing before going on to L2BEAT. Obviously, I work with a lot of people who used to work at ETHWorks as well, and I think you joined around the same time as many of them. What do you think are the learnings of coming from a software house background versus working at just a kind of traditional product company? Are there unique lessons you've taken with you or had to kind of relearn as you've started L2BEAT?
So I think one big benefit about working at the software house is that instead of having experience with just one company, you get to see like how different companies work. Of course, this is like an external experience because after all, you're not employed at those companies. You're just an external contractor that helps them build something. But I've seen like a lot of people, and this is kind of why with L2BEAT, sorry, okay, maybe let's go like 2 steps back. A lot of people today, when they do business in the, let's say, not traditional, but like the commonly accepted way of you get VC funding, you grow, you get more VC funding, you grow more, like you acquire users and stuff like this. And this is fun, it can make you a lot of money. It just has one problem. That is, if you fail, like it can be hard to identify that you failed for a long time because you may be focused on traction, right? But you're still losing money, and like people don't really need this, but because you're like offering the product at such a high discount, then yeah, you have some users. So I've seen some of it, and also when you get VC funding, you now have the like space, let's say, to like explore different ideas, and all of them might be bad, but you still have the funding, so you try to do different things. So I worked with some companies like this when we were at ETHWorks, and one of the lessons, like for me, was to like just do stuff earlier that people want, and I guess this really worked out for me. Maybe L2BEAT is not a multi-billion-dollar company that's now listed alongside Apple, but it's something that I personally really like, which is seeing people that actually like find it valuable and want to contribute because we can touch on that later. L2BEAT has kind of a unique business model too.
Well, I'd love to go more into L2BEAT from there. And actually, when we've spoken in the past, I really loved the L2BEAT founding story because it felt so organic about how it came to be. But maybe you can share the background of how L2BEAT got started.
Yeah, depending on who you ask of the original founders, you're gonna get a slightly different story from like, oh, he was riding a bike or he was just like doing something. But let me try to like get the like commonly accepted story, which is, I guess it was like 2021. Should have been around that time. Chris Kaczar and Bartek Kiepuszewski were working at Maker. And for those of you who don't know, Maker is the like original DeFi projects that did a decentralized stablecoin. And the Maker had an idea for DAI, the stablecoin, to be available on different chains through like canonical means. Right now, if you get DAI on different chains, it doesn't work as it was like envisioned back then, because you get it bridged through different bridges, maybe the like regular bridge to NL2 or like a bridge like, I don't know, layer 0 or something. There are tons of ways to get DAI to your chain, and none of them are what, let's say, Maker envisioned initially, which is like deploying copies of Maker on those different chains and like having specific mechanisms to transfer funds, which would allow for like different, like complex stuff. Probably it isn't that way because it was too complex. One thing that they needed to like accomplish all of this is they needed to know how risky it would be to deploy on those different chains, because while Maker is a decentralized stablecoin, it's not a completely unmanaged stablecoin. They have like a governance and they decide on different security parameters. And if something goes bad, it's sort of maybe like a central bank that can manipulate different parameters. So they needed to assess risk, and they made like a risk framework for assessing risk on all the different L2s. And initially it was just an Excel spreadsheet. They did that and thought to themselves, we could like publish this as like a simple web page. Maybe people will find it useful. And so they did. And I remember Chris Kaczar's like idea about how a web page should look. It should be like distinctly ugly so that people remember it, which, yes, it very much was distinctly ugly. So around that time, I met Chris to play squash. And we talked, and he said, if you find that you have some time, maybe you could help us with this L2BEAT thing. And yeah, I did. We got an initial grant from the Ethereum Foundation to kick things off, which allowed us to change the look from distinctly ugly to acceptable. And refactor some of the code. Like back then, it was funny. All of the data that was on the web page was being, like every time we built the code, it downloaded all of the data again and stored it in like a single JSON file. But stuff like this. So we refactored this and we created like a Twitter account for it. I started posting. People started like following, tweeting about this, like being very active. And we sat down, the three of us, me, Chris, and Bartek, and I thought, you know what, maybe let's do a company out of it, right? And so we did. And like initially it was rough because for the first few months nobody paid us anything and we didn't pay ourselves anything. But then we found some footing, we got some grants, we got some support, we did some side projects, and it's kind of crazy to me, like looking back, how successful we are, because we now are a company of around 20 people. We're doing research, we're doing software development for the website, data gathering, analysis, and we do some side projects, we publish reports, all of this, and yeah, quite a journey, I would say.
Yeah, amazing. And I think you actually kind of highlight two interesting things there. One, there's so many interesting things in crypto that have actually come out of makers' needs. I believe like one or two of the audit companies, you have things like Steakhouse, with these financial advisory firms that are very influential at other places now. Obviously you guys, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch of other examples. But it is kind of an interesting testament of decentralization where if that was more of a traditional company, likely all of these things would be verticals or product lines within Maker, and instead you have this ecosystem of things that are kind of flourishing. You guys are a great testament of that.
Yeah, and it's probably not only like crypto as a whole or like Maker as a specific place, it's also all of the people that are building all of those things. Like crypto has a very individualistic mindset, right? If you have a good idea, just build it, and it sort of works out. There are not many other industries where you can just go and like immediately find people interested in it, and this is something very unique, I would say, about crypto.
Also, just with your kind of co-founders there, you touch on kind of this Polish mafia that I think between Maker has a lot of Polish people, you guys obviously have a lot, my company has a lot. But, where do you think that comes from? Is it just good science and technical universities? And, how has, Warsaw and Poland kind of become this hub of great crypto developers?
I think it's an accident. I don't see this as like, oh, Poland has like a unique, I don't know, stars align or something. I think it's more like once you have one person that's doing something interesting, you get another. And then maybe they start like involving others. And then you have this like boiling pot of people contributing ideas, like doing everything with each other. And that sort of grows. Like I remember we had at some point like meetups about like ZK, about like smart contract development in general, about TypeScript, but also focused on Ethereum. Like all of this stuff. And it was all organized by people in the community here. And what's funny is that actually Poland has two blockchain communities. One is the, let's say, one that you mentioned, which is people that I'm familiar with and like that are basically developers. And the other part is people that are more interested in the financial upside that promote different other projects. So, there are ups and downs everywhere. So like given those, let's say, two blockchain industries in Poland, I would say it's not anything unique about Poland. It's more something about people with vision, and then they attract more people. And like, for example, at L2BEAT, we have very, I wouldn't say strict, but very uniform culture of people aligned with values like decentralization, openness, like all of our code is open source, and we've built that internally. And so if L2BEAT was to disappear tomorrow, I'm sure all of those people would like carry those values on, right? Because it's just like in Ethworks, we had, for example, values about code quality, and I'm sure all of those people, now that Ethworks is no more, still have those values close to their heart.
Very important key point there. Coming back to L2BEAT a bit, something I was surprised when I looked at in the past was the amount of traffic your guys' site gets for what is a very analytical and wonky type of data. So I'm curious, who are the users? Is it very consumer-focused type of people that are trying to learn and bridge the gap? Is it more researchers and deep in the weeds crypto people? Who do you find is the archetype of people who are coming to the L2BEAT site regularly?
Yeah, so maybe let me start by saying, like, who do we want to see, right? Ideally, we would like to see people that are exploring crypto, want to know more, and want to see the details about each system. Those systems, like, let's say L2BEAT didn't exist, are very opaque. You don't really know what's going on. You try to look at the docs, they don't really say anything. There is no like centralized resource to like get, like, let's say you want to develop on I don't know, a chain. You don't know the smart contract addresses. You don't know the like different inconsistencies between those chains. You don't know like what to expect when the chain goes down, stuff like this. So we bring all of this together so that when you actually want to do something, either develop on the chain or use the chain or anything, you're just informed, right? What we don't want in general is people building those systems advertising things that are not true, which is very often the case. And we try to hold them accountable, and we like our target is users that would like to be informed and make informed decision about their money, because ultimately using any of those systems comes with risks. And those risks are not explained on the websites of those projects. So we present those risks so that, you as a consumer or as a developer or as anyone else know what you're getting into. What we find is that some of our users are actually like this. There are a lot of like tech savvy users, crypto OGs and stuff that like really care about this stuff. On the other hand, we have users more interested not in risks, but in the metrics. Some of it is fueled by like tribalism, right? I want my L2 to win, right? Some of it is fueled by like curiosity. What's the new thing? What's hot? Where can I look to like learn new things? And some of it is also fueled by airdrop hunting, out of all things. So funnily enough, and we as L2BEAT don't promote it, right? Like if you go to like L2BEAT, you don't see like, oh, those projects didn't have an airdrop yet. Like, go now. None of this is here, right? And yet we learn that people use our site for airdrop hunting. So the question is how? Well, apparently we have an upcoming tab. And we did the upcoming tab specifically. So all of those projects that are like constantly nagging us, hey, can we get at it? Can you get at it? And we were like constantly, no, you haven't deployed anything. Can we get at it? So we're like, okay, you get your own like little place. And people love it because they go there and find all of the airdrops. Well, good for them, I guess, and good for those projects. So I guess everybody wins. It's still funny to me. And the last user, let's say, or type of user that uses L2BEAT is actually the projects themselves. So let's say you were building an L2 and you were like deep in the weeds of like developing your own custom ZK EVM or something. You spend all of those resources on those internal research, internal tooling, like all of this. You don't really have like time or people to spare to look at other things. It's complex, right? So what you do instead is you go to L2BEAT and actually read about their technology, about the risks, about their trade-offs, and so you know kind of what you're up against.
So I think the summary would be you have an extremely diverse set of people, from the classic crypto airdrop hunters to more analytical people trying to make informed decisions. And I guess kind of related to that, I mean, it does feel like while crypto has the ability for all sort of data to be just public and open, to some extent for some verticals, it also feels like there is a lack of reliable data. Do you have any kind of stories of users who have maybe used L2BEAT to kind of inform them that you've heard from them and like how it's impacted their decisions about either maybe where to deploy or where to put funds or anything of that nature?
One thing that comes to mind is that because of our like policy of everything is free, everything is open source, you can just use it, we have many different people using our data. So, and we just don't often know. So we find out through like someone telling us, oh, hey, you know, those people use L2BEAT, those other people use L2BEAT. For example, like A16Z in their reports use L2BEAT, and like many prominent people on Twitter use L2BEAT. And the good thing is, very early on, I had the foresight to like put our logo on the charts, because nobody's going to screenshot the entire website. Everybody just clips the chart, right? But the chart has the logo. so at least people know where it's coming from. And yeah, and I probably can't say who, but there are a lot of people that just come to us and say, like, you know, like I can't say who, but I can say that those are the projects, right? The different L2s, and they just come to us and say, yo, what you guys doing, nobody else is doing. Like, you're actually like analyzing the contracts, looking at what's deployed, like all of this work, and they are very grateful for it.
Yeah, well, taking that another way, you guys have obviously become a very influential site. Do you find that L2s kind of conform now to the standards that you guys lay out, kind of, you know, on the kind of levels and some of those things as well? You know, so do you find that teams are building with, I don't want to say appeasing, but sort of trying to meet the L2BEAT standards when they're deploying?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. Like, for example, we try to do a lot of influencing around stuff like upgradability, because when all of those projects still have, let's say, safety rails like security councils, upgrade delays, governance systems, because if you didn't have all of this and you just deploy the projects that like set in stone, it's too early kind of for this. You would be hacked. You would, like, people will find bugs, exploit the system. So to prevent that, you know, you have this upgradability. But when we started, most of the projects were like instantly upgradable. But now we see a lot of projects like moving to systems where they actually put the entire rollup behind governance, or they introduce time locks, or they introduce like security councils. And we try to influence a lot of this. Like, for example, in Arbitrum, at some point, like, yeah, it's still the case now. In Arbitrum, you have a security council that can... I don't remember, because there is a lot of projects. I think what Security Council in Arbitrum does, they can upgrade the project and they can like speed up a proposal. So depending on some circumstances, either 9 of 12 was required or 7 of 12. And when we discussed, and this is also something great about L2BEAT, you get to speak to the most influential people. Like, on our framework for what the upgradability should look like in rollups, Vitalik was one of the people that really was interested and was like talking to us and discussing all of this. So through those discussions, we decided that there should be a threshold, like a minimum percentage of Security Council members required to perform like security upgrades. And the 7 out of 12 in Arbitrum doesn't actually meet that. Because we are a very big delegate in the Arbitrum DAO, we are able to propose a change. It just passed the snapshot vote to increase this 7 out of 12 to 9 out of 12 in all cases. And so this was going to be implemented soon. So we're like actively working with all of those projects to like meet our guidelines. On the other hand, you have projects that just want to innovate, and we don't want to hold the innovation back. So people experiment with all sorts of different things. Through like when they post sequencing data to where they posted, like recently, a lot of projects have been moving their data off to Celestia, for example. And, you know, we some people joke that we are the police of like layer 2s. I don't think so personally, but it's a nice catchy phrase. We cannot really force anyone to do anything. We can just describe what they do. So people really do innovate in many different ways, some good, some bad, but it's a mix of some projects conforming, but we had projects in the past that tried to, like, I wouldn't say specifically game our metrics, but because of the way they were doing things, it effectively came out to gaming our metrics. So we worked with them to work it out.
So two things I want to touch on there. One, it's something I've heard from teams that have worked with you guys. And actually, the first guest on my pod here was Leslie Tam, who used to contribute to the Boba Network. And he had mentioned at some point what a kind of pleasurable experience he had working with you guys as a team, even if you were maybe harsh on them sometimes, or kind of, directed them, or not directed them, but encouraged them maybe to, like, look at other things, or maybe didn't give them the score metric they wanted. He always felt that he had such a good open line of communication. You guys were so explanatory, and so it does seem like that goes a long way. Something else you mentioned in terms of delegation, though, I found interesting, which is obviously you have a lot of influence at L2BEAT, right? You could write a blog post detailing someone's bad practices, and they would likely conform or at least put out a counter blog post. How have you found the role of delegation and being able to take a more active role, perhaps, kind of like, as you mentioned, with the Arbitrum Security Council? And is that something you want to try and do more and more of the chains and ecosystems that you cover?
Yeah, definitely. The delegation is very deliberate. Right? It's not an accident that we have this active role. Initially, it was just exploratory. Initially, we were just a delegate in Optimism. It was small, like nobody really knew what was going on, but we found that being active in the project communities is actually very important for a few reasons. First of all, if we were not active there, we wouldn't know what's going on. The most important decisions are being discussed there, and so we need to be at the center of it. But second of all, if we were not active there, then how to say it? DAOs currently have a very big problem of contribution quality, meaning a lot of members are not very active. A lot of members are quite random. They have some tokens delegated, but they're not really doing anything with them, and it's a big problem. It's people try to address it by either rewarding representatives, and maybe vetting, but all of this is complex, mainly because of the financial incentive around tokens and how it plays out. You need to probably do an airdrop or something, and then people delegate tokens. So it's hard to get quality people at the end. And we felt like we are quality people. And we can provide good delegation services that benefit the community in that. And so by having us actively participate there, I think we make those communities better, and therefore make the L2s themselves better. And this is a major factor in the continued success of L2BEAT financially, because some of those projects have very active grants frameworks or public good funding programs, and by being there we can also make sure that they fund public goods such as us.
Well, there's a couple different ways I can go here. I'd like to come back to the business piece in a second, but I guess so as a delegate at some of these chains, do you guys participate in all of the votes? Do you have a focus kind of on more security and sort of technical considerations? And I guess part of the frame of that question is there's an open question in my mind how complementary versus competitive a lot of these L2 ecosystems are. So I'd also like to talk about how you kind of balance maybe being delegate at Arbitrum and Optimism, if they're both working to fund competitive grant programs or something like that.
That's a good question. I think that the best way to answer is this. Arbitrum as a project or as a community or whatever has its loose agenda, make Arbitrum better or something, right? Similarly, Optimism, attract more people to the ecosystem, stuff like this, just grow, be better. Us at L2BEAT, we have a slightly different agenda. We want everything to be better, yes, but we also want them to be more secure, more equal, more open, fairer, stuff like this. So when we vote, we of course take into account what would be good for the project, but also what would be good for everyone overall. And we haven't found situations yet where our participation in different projects would result in some conflicts, like, oh, because we are in project X, we now suddenly don't know how to vote. Also, like, if we want to go down deeper into those governance questions, I can sure try to answer all of them. But I also am not the best person to do this. We have a wonderful person managing being a representative for L2BEAT. It's Krzysztof Urbański. And he is also working with Sinkas, which is another employee of ours that's like, they make a really great team. And you asked if we vote at 100% of proposals. We definitely try to. And for every proposal that we vote for, we try to leave a reasoning for why we did that. That's also addressing some of the like quality contributions. Like, a lot of people just vote, right? So we try to give our explanation, and we find that it's actually some of the votes, right, are quite contentious. And so we had people reach out and like ask us, why did you vote like this? Why did you vote like this? So we have a program of like office hours for governance, where we have a Google Meet link. People can join in and we discuss all of the things happening in different projects. And yeah, it's a lot of work, and we're considering potentially even like increasing the size of our governance team. But yeah, it's very interesting. Like, I feel like governance really has the possibility of solving a lot of problems in crypto, because previously, let's say you wanted to have a safe, decentralized project, you just make it immutable, like Uniswap, for example. By the way, Uniswap has its own governance, which we're also part of, but that's besides the point. Like Uniswap V2, you cannot really do anything besides maybe setting the fee. It doesn't really affect things that much. And so it's like immutable. But things like Arbitrum, no, you can actually like modify the code. And what do you modify the code to? What happens in case of errors? And if you just leave it all to the developer team, you can have cases where, and we've had projects like this, thankfully not L2s, where people were, for example, arrested and through government action were forced to deposit funds in different locations, right? And so if you have the DAO managing the system, you, of course, add layers of like bureaucracy and friction, but you also make it more secure in a way. And if we can just solve some of the coordination problems, I feel like we can have a future where systems self-organize in a way and manage themselves for the future and like be evergreen, which is really fun. And I hope we get to this future. But of course, we have a lot of problems to solve along the way.
Well, I hear what you kind of touch on there is this idea of resilience, maybe that a DAO can bring. So I forgot the specific example of that bridge, but so long as all of the delegates don't find themselves in China at the same time, for example, it is a pretty resilient system where some government can't just, require everybody to hand over their private keys or whatever it might be.
Yeah. So, and it's, not only governments. Governments are one example. Some people just rug pull, right? And let's say, okay, maybe not in the same sentence. I don't want to accuse anyone of anything. So we have projects launching. Okay, maybe a better example than what I wanted to use. I think this was token called like Bob token or something, where there was no token. People just send money to the guy, right? At some point. So there are things like this happening that require enormous amounts of trust. And I think the great thing about crypto is that it has the potential to remove all of that trust. And I find governance to be a stepping stone to that goal.
So coming back to the business model of L2BEAT, in the past, you've described to me L2BEAT as a public goods company. I think you guys are probably the first to describe yourselves as that way and kind of declare that as the business model of L2BEAT. Could you explain a bit more what that actually means in practice and how that works out from the business model?
Sure. So at some point in the timeline of L2BEAT, we were considering different options to fund ourselves. And on the one hand, we had the possibility of going the route of like growth and product. And we had an idea that we could maybe do like a graphical solution for analyzing smart contract systems. And some of that code is actually still used by us today. But what we found is, we're doing this, but all of this like work on the core thing, the website, the data, the research, is like pulling us away from doing product. Okay, we're thinking, okay, let's fund ourselves by maybe doing projects for different people. So we tried it. We did, for example, build the StarkX Explorer. So we talked with Starkware. Starkware said, "Oh, we have those systems, those StarkXs. They are like L2s, and there was no Explorer for them because they weren't like a regular chain. They weren't EVM compatible. They had a completely different model of execution. They used like old Cairo versions to like specify the system logic. And instead of posting all of the transactions somewhere, they had like storage diffs, not storage diffs, state diffs, something like this. Like basically diffs of the state. So it must be state diffs. So state diffs instead of transaction lists. And you couldn't just take Etherscan and put it on there because it's completely different. So we built an Explorer. One of the projects is DYDX. So the Explorer for DYDX is actually ours. And through that, you can browse what the state of DYDX is from Ethereum's point of view. Because if you use DYDX and you go there, you see one set of balances, but it's actually different from what Ethereum sees, because Ethereum sees sort of something in the past. For like, it's a lot of technical complexity there. The other thing that you can do for the Explorer is withdraw money without talking to DYDX. You don't have to go to their website, nothing. You just do Ethereum transactions and you can withdraw money. This is also a feature of the Explorer. And this funded us. This was actually one of the things we did very early on in our history. And this provided some initial funding, which was great. But again, this work pulled us from what we were doing, the core research, the core data gathering, the core analytics. And we thought to ourselves, you know what? It's like we're doing all of this other stuff, and yet every time there is a Gitcoin round, we're maxing it, right? Every time we talk to the EF, they want to fund us more. And the like final thing that like convinced us, hey, you can actually change the business model was when we participated in RPGF from Optimism, where we were like, I think the second from the top in terms of project that received the most OP there, which was great, and we sat down and thought to ourselves, like, we're doing all of these other things, and the community is like the market is telling us, do this one thing, like, here's the money, do this thing. And it's not a conventional business model, because we're not selling anything, right? We have no direct customers. And yet, even though all our code is open source, all of the data is for free, like we don't have anything that's like not public, like people find ways to reward us, which is very unique. I don't think it would be possible outside of crypto in any way. Maybe in like the far future. And but this is basically how public goods company work. We build public goods, and then the community finds ways to reward us, and we help the community find those ways, right? Because someone has to apply for those grants, someone has to like we have to tell people about what we do. But it's still amazing that it can sustain so many people working on this, and it's just a testament to how valuable our work is for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe the quickest comparison I can kind of think of is like the scientific research grant community in different countries. Like the US has the NIH, and people also go out and pursue individual grants from wealthy donors who want to, see cancer research furthered or something like that. In crypto, I guess most of this is around, research that I think probably is hard to monetize in some other way, shape, or form. Like, I'm sure you guys could have a great business model. But it's also, and I'd actually be curious if you had to monetize, how you'd go about that. But it's also not entirely clear to me how you would start monetizing some of the security research that you've done. So I'm curious about that.
Yeah, it's actually a tricky question, because we definitely have a lot of people trying to come up with solutions for us, because I think the idea of just like relying on community support is sort of like driving a car and taking your hands off the wheel. You probably, you may find yourself not knowing, right, what the future holds. And so they say like, oh, but you guys have so much traffic to the website, maybe try ads, right? So I'm gonna like talk quickly about the ads. We thought very briefly about ads. I personally hate ads, but that's beside the point. Many crypto sites have ads, but if our site is mainly valuable because we provide trusted, accurate information, and then we run ads, and the ad says, this new crypto project has a 10x airdrop starting today, click now, be rich on Friday. I think that goes so counter to the idea of what we do that it's just reconcilable. Like, some people say it wouldn't damage our reputation. I personally have a different idea, but maybe I'm too principled. And the other possible business models are like closing down what we do and like offering it only to people who pay, which is also possible, like paid APIs, like specific research that's only accessed by paid members and stuff like this. But in a way, this would actually decrease the value we produce, because offering it up for free allows for so much innovation that we don't have to do anything about. Like, we don't have to give anyone permission to use our data. And so it enables other people to do fun stuff with it. And I think that's great.
Yeah, something that comes across as clear in your response there is that you guys have a very clear set of company values, and I guess individual values as well, that seem to make some of these decisions significantly easier, rather than just sort of chasing what is maybe the easiest thing, which would be, you know, some sort of airdrop advertisement or something of that nature. So, well,
yeah, that's...
one other... Oh, please, you go.
Go ahead. No, I just wanted to say that's definitely the case. Like I mentioned before, but everybody who works at L2BEAT is very much aligned with, you know, doing the right thing. And I guess for a lot of different people, the right thing is a lot of different things. For us, the right thing is to provide trusted and accurate information. And I think we do a pretty good job, but that also means that, as you said, some of the decisions are easier than others.
One question I wanted to ask quickly was, so you mentioned kind of iterating through some of these different business models, the graphical smart contract explorer interface, some work for other clients, and then ultimately in a public goods company. What was the period that iteration happened? Is that 3 months, a year? How long is that kind of decision process on your side?
Oh, we are slow. Like, I think all of those ideas are like around a year to like think through. Yeah. So like we are a public goods company. Like the term and like the concrete vision, I think. How long? I don't know. Less than a year now, I think. It was previously more undecided.
So if someone else is, I see. And so if someone else is listening to this and they're thinking, okay, we have this data that people seem to love, it's tough to monetize maybe, our company wants to become a public goods company as well. What would you recommend in that thought process for those types of people?
So I think what they should do is try to like apply for different programs that fund public goods. There are a few of them, like we try to take part in a lot of them. There's Gitcoin, there's of course Optimism or PGF, but there are some other ones. From the top of my head, and there are more definitely, but we recently found out that Golem, and if you part like Polish mafia, Golem is also like a company started in Poland, I think. It was one of the OG Ethereum projects. They got a lot of money in the ICO era, and now they are putting it to good use by funding projects. So that's also really cool. And so try to apply for those programs. And it's not easy because some of them are political, in the sense that, for example, with the recent Optimism's public goods funding program, there were a lot of discussions. Should VC-funded projects receive funding or not? And so there are a lot of questions, and the space is constantly evolving. But I think this is the right way to go about it now. And I think our strategy for the future to secure a good future for ourselves, but also for other projects as L2BEAT, is to try to convince even more systems projects to open up programs like this. Ideally, L2BEAT would be funded not only through those programs, but all of the different players in the L2 space would be contributing, and then they would have infrastructure and understanding and the process, so that when new people come along with things that are useful to the community, the path is created for them. They just have to walk it, and you know what you do. And this is kind of why when I say we are a public goods company, and you said you're probably one of the only ones, because we're still figuring things out. It's been remarkably working for us, but I've also heard not a lot of people yet have found success in this way. So I'm really looking forward to the future when we can share a playbook, let's say, and then people can just follow, because that would be easier.
Absolutely. So I want to transition a bit to, well, actually, before that, you mentioned the last Optimism Retro Public Goods funding and some of the political conversations perhaps that started there. If you care to share, where do you net out on some of that? Is it okay for VC-funded projects to, apply for grants and some of the lobbying stuff that goes on? How did you view that last round?
That's a good question. Personally, I think that the problem is not necessarily with the VC-funded projects or not. I think the problem is with, let's say, moderation in general. And moderation not in terms of do less or something, in terms of people who actually review those applications. In the latest round, there were a lot of applications that submitted data that was, let's say, either not fully accurate or it was missing some stuff. And yes, there was initial filtration that filtered a lot of projects that were clearly not suitable. But then for projects that looked legitimate, there wasn't really a verification of the claims made in the application. And I think, and of course, this is a constant trade-off. How do you do this in a decentralized way? This is also some of the criticism we used to face at L2BEAT. If your guys are so pro decentralization, why are you a company that's doing this? And you're the centralization of all this research. It's a tough call, but I think having better tools for example, in Optimism, it's I think badge holders, they're called, right? So members of the collective. They are there to review those projects. They don't have good tools to do this, right? They don't have good support. So if this is increased, I think they can come to a common shared understanding what's acceptable. But I think the bigger problem is not that some VC-funded projects got money, is that let's say expectations versus reality. Expectations, people are super truthful. They say what they did for the community and stuff, and reality, popularity contest, bigger brand, more money. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess I can sort of see some of that as well. But we'll see. I think there's another round coming up in 6 months or so. So I'm curious what kind of learnings are implemented in that time. Also, I kind of think back to like some of the criticism, big companies like Facebook have received around trust and safety and moderation. And, I think their thing has been that they hire now like 50,000 people to do moderation and still it feels impossible. In Optimism's case, probably does, obviously infinitesimally smaller scale, but probably does require like maybe a few full-time people just to actually do that verification on top of what the badge holders are maybe already doing. So we'll see. Okay, so I'd like to move a bit more to kind of the whole L2 ecosystem. And really kind of two big questions here. One is, you and your team are at the forefront of understanding everything across this ecosystem. Do you personally find yourself almost having, almost like knowing too much where the bodies are buried and feeling hesitant about using L2s, just kind of given the state of where they are now? Or do you feel comfortable actually interacting with these ecosystems in a major way?
Good question. I feel like I feel comfortable in the sense that as L2BEAT, we even have some of our funds like on different L2s. We accept donations there. Me personally, despite having a company in crypto, doing all of this, I'm actually not a heavy crypto user, right? I obviously use it. I know how it works and all of this. It's just I don't find it's maybe it's like coming back to how I think about crypto games now. Like people do this for various reasons. I do things because I find them fun. And in crypto, I find learning and developing more fun than transacting on Uniswap, which is great. It's just, I did it a few times. Cool. Now I can explore different things. And so this is how I look at it personally. So I've used some L2s. It's just I don't have this much of a use case for it, right? But speaking as L2BEAT, the company, yeah, we do use them. We have some funds there, so we don't find those systems like terribly insecure. Like, oh, everybody who now has funds on one of those L2s are gonna lose it tomorrow. On the same on the other hand, right? Of course, there are risks, right? Even keeping money on Ethereum L1 has risks because it's not like money in a DeFi smart contract on L1 is inherently more secure than money on a DeFi smart contract on L2. You're still exposing yourselves to the risks of the DeFi smart contract, right? What about like tokens on L2? You are still exposing tokens on L1 versus tokens on L2. Yes, you have the L2 risks, but you also have the risk of the token itself. So like, to be honest, like if you're using Ethereum, there is only one asset that's like has the minimal amount of added risk, which is Ether, right? Everything else, every single other asset on Ethereum has added risk. And it doesn't mean that they're bad assets. It just means that there are more risks. And this is kind of why L2BEAT, like we have stages, right? But stages are not value judgment. Never in the L2BEAT page, nowhere, you will find something like, oh, this project is actually really bad. Don't put any money there, right? There is not a statement like this. We just inform users about the risks. And then if the users find the risks acceptable, they can use this is how I look at it.
So speaking of some of the biggest risks of L2s, I noticed there are two tabs on your website, scaling and bridges. And I think historically bridges have probably been the biggest honeypot of all hacks within crypto, and some could say are the biggest risks. How have you guys thought about covering them so far, and do you see that ecosystem getting to a place of higher security and a place where users can feel more confident in terms of trusting them?
Let's maybe ask ourselves the following question. Why bridges are so hard? And the answer, I would say, is that you have two different chains, and each chain doesn't know anything about the outside world. So even, let's say, trivial or like trivial stuff, like getting, I don't know, the price of ETH on the chain, turns out to be complex problems. Like entire companies like exist to provide data about the current price of an asset. So now imagine that you want to do something else, not the price of the asset, but like some data about a different chain, whether or not someone has transferred money on a different chain. Well, you need some sort of an oracle. So essentially what a bridge is, it's an oracle that tells blockchain A, hey, someone deposited money, and tells blockchain B, hey, you can now like unlock this money, stuff like this. And in this process, you have the added component of people taking money on one chain and putting it in one place, right? All of the different people using a bridge from, I don't know, let's say Ethereum to Solana, right? I want to bridge to Ethereum to Solana through like, I don't know, Piotr's bridge, right? Let's say I created a bridge. So what I would do, I would deploy a smart contract on Ethereum, and people would like put all sorts of assets to the smart contract, and the smart contract would like grow to like millions and millions of dollars. And the entire way I would operate the bridge is I would have a system that looks at the Ethereum smart contract. Oh, it emitted an event. Okay, I go to Solana, I mint some tokens. Mint some tokens. And then whenever someone wants to transfer back, I look at Solana, oh, they transferred me some tokens, let's burn them and release the tokens for the bridge. In all of this process, the Ethereum smart contracts accumulates a ton of money there. If for some reason my keys that I have as the bridge operator, which allow for releasing the tokens and like minting the tokens and so on, get compromised, all of this money is lost. If for some reason the smart contract that I deployed has a bug, all of this money is lost. And so we've seen both those cases happen. And you know, people don't like, for some reason, writing simple smart contracts, right? Because if the smart contract on Ethereum is like dead simple, there is really not a lot of place for bugs, right? So then you like minimize the risk, and you only have the risk of having your keys compromised. But no, people like to implement complex smart contracts very much, and they do like audits and so on and so forth. And then what they do, you know, you have the code audited, yeah, you push an upgrade, whatever, just someone wrote. And for example, this is how Nomad got hacked, right? They have everything audited, but they push an upgrade, and the upgrade wasn't audited or something. I don't remember fully. I'm sorry if I'm messing things up, but this is what I remember. And this is basically how they got exploited. And we have a lot of stories like these. And the fundamental problem is not, like, there is a problem that I said, people like to write complex smart contracts for no reason. But the other problem is that bridges at the core solve a problem that's impossible to solve, right? If you have no access to the outside world, you cannot really know what's happening in the outside world. And so it's tough. Why are rollups a solution to this? Well, in contrast to bridges, rollups have some access to the outside world. Rollups have access to the parent chain, right? So let's say you have a rollup on Ethereum, it can actually know what happened on Ethereum, right? With certainty. And similarly, Ethereum can actually know what happened on the rollup with certainty. And so you eliminate this problem of needing an oracle. And you can, of course, add this oracle for some optimizations, but it's still way more secure because you can always fall back to the truth. And both chains can actually know the truth, meaning that you can minimize the risk of hacks because, you know, what is there to compromise? Both chains know about each other. And of course, because of the way those systems are built, you still have upgradability. So if the keys that can upgrade the system are compromised, all of this is still true, but it's not true in principle, right? In principle, with a bridge, you need some trust. In principle, with a rollup, you can eliminate the trust. And this is why rollups are superior. And this is why we see a shift, like from bridges, maybe over to rollups. Bridges are still very important, and we have this dashboard, but again, with the story of like focus, we're focusing more on L2s. We'd like to revisit bridges. Maybe this year we'll actually have a revised bridges dashboard that provides more accurate data, deeper insights. But we'll see. I don't want to promise because things may change. But I personally would very much like to see it happen because our bridges dashboard definitely deserves more love than it's getting right now.
Yeah, I think in terms of just security vectors, it could use the L2BEAT treatment for the user benefit. But maybe moving a bit, just as we're kind of talking through this modular and kind of roll-up stack, it feels like the trend or big hype area of the last few months, 6 months, let's say, has been around things like Celestia and DA solutions and, kind of picking apart other pieces of the stack. I'm curious, one, if that's something, those different layers are something you guys have looked into covering and how you would think about that. And then two, and I know this isn't your area you maybe cover as much, but I've always thought about kind of the value between each of the layers of this modular stack. And as these new pieces get introduced, Celestia, today, which trades at some crazy, deca-billion-dollar valuation, like, do they take away some of the value that otherwise would be at an Ethereum or things like that? So, bit of a rambling question. So I can retake it if you want.
Okay, let's try to address the simpler thing, which is, will we cover things like the different DA solutions? And the answer is yes. We plan to do this. It will hopefully happen soon. Not too soon. We actually have to build it, but that's the plan. We will probably have something similar to bridges, but for DA solutions that actually describe the risks. And then probably or when you go to L2BEAT and you see a project, it can say that it's going to say that either it's posting data to Ethereum or it's posting data, for example, to Celestia, and you'll be able to read all about it. How does it actually affect the security? In terms of whether or not those different solutions are actually like taking away from Ethereum or from, I don't know, from whatever. I'm not sure. Personally, I think that innovation always adds value. Like, I don't see how innovation could subtract value. At the same time, it's sometimes hard to distinguish innovation from like repackaging different stuff and like hand waving. And this is what we've seen a lot in the crypto space, where things launch and they are just vaporware. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we'll see in time, right? We'll see what solutions are actually useful, what solutions actually provide value. The like storing data on different blockchains has some trade-offs with regards to, we're kind of reintroducing the bridging problem in a limited way, because Ethereum now has to know whether or not you posted data to some other chain. Like there are a lot of nuances that start to come up. We'll try to cover them, and then I'll probably be more equipped to tell you all about it.
I'm looking forward to that. Maybe we can do that as a follow-up in the future. But as we're kind of coming to the end here, I am remembering back to when you and I ran into each other at ETH Warsaw back in August or whenever that was. And we were talking a bit about L2BEAT, and you mentioned how much of what you do is actually pretty manual in terms of checking to see if there's been changes in smart contracts, and it's sort of a weekly thing that you guys go through. I think you've built some different tooling and stuff to actually address that, but would love to hear about the actual data gathering and collection and cleaning process that you guys go through.
Yeah, so that's actually a very interesting part of what we do. Let's start with the simpler stuff. Simpler in the sense that they don't require a lot of manual work, which is calculating stuff like TVL or like activity, what we do with transactions. It doesn't require as much manual work, because what we essentially do is we say, okay, those tokens in those escrows, just get the data, process it, store it in the database, expose it in an endpoint, and we display it on the front end. Similarly with activity, we query the blockchain APIs and download the number of transactions, aggregate it by day, and display it. Okay, so it's not rocket science. It's a bit more complex than I'm just explaining, but it's not rocket science. On the other hand, we have stuff like risks. And just by the name, you'll probably figure out that you cannot just say, oh, risk is like 15. Okay, what does 15 mean? So you cannot like calculate it. You have to actually assess it in some way. And part of that is reading the smart contracts, figuring out how they work, and figuring out the security properties. And why am I saying like smart contracts? Why didn't I mention like going to a project website and like reading the docs? It doesn't work. We tried this. Like, no, the docs, first of all, don't explain it. Second of all, the docs are aspirational. And third of all, they often include inconsistencies. So you cannot really work with the docs. You have to read the smart contracts. And also, you have to read the smart contracts. You cannot read the code on GitHub because the code on GitHub is also not what is deployed on chain. So you have to read the smart contracts from chain. So what we have developed is a tool called Discovery. And what Discovery does is it allows you to take a smart contract and from a single smart contract address, plot an entire smart contract system with all of the different parameters that it has. So let's say we would like to see how Arbitrum works. We take a contract that we have, let's say an escrow, where people put money into Arbitrum. We put it into Discovery, and what it does, it like finds, oh, this escrow actually has an owner. Oh, it actually has a pointer to the rollup smart contract, and the rollup smart contract is actually a proxy and has this implementation. It has this owner. It has this and this actually, there is the governance somewhere. All of those contracts are fetched. For each of those contracts, you get all of the parameters, like what's the upgrade delay, like who's the sequencer, all of this stuff. So all of this data is like automatically gathered, and then comes the part where we need a researcher. And in the past, what we did, so we have built a prototype version of this tool, but it was always run manually. So we had a researcher that was running this tool, like checking, okay, what changed from the previous time I ran this tool? It wasn't a hard process. And you mentioned we had like a weekly thing where people ran it. It was like a whole complex thing. We have automated this also. So we have integrated the Discovery tool into our backend, and it like automatically figures out what has changed from the time it previously ran Discovery automatically to now. So it can see, oh, actually a new smart contract has been deployed. Oh, actually the sequencer address has been changed. Oh, actually the delay for upgrading has been changed. So a lot of those values are changed. We have integration with Discord where we have all of those changes posted, which is fun. And so whenever we see those changes, we also involve a researcher at that point. They look at what was changed, and funnily enough, we have also made this process also easier because, for example, you deploy a new contract, like you would normally have to read all of the source code, but now we have tools that allow you to diff the source code of this new deployed contract with existing contracts to see maybe it's similar to something, because ultimately we have so many different projects, right? Tons of them. And they always have upgrades. And individually, the projects don't update very often, but we have so many of them that we have multiple updates to projects in a single week. So it's a lot of work. And the company is 20 people. Not all of them are researchers. Actually, at this point, we only have 2 researchers. We plan to hire more. And it's a lot of work. And so we invest heavily in research automation to extract as much mundane stuff to be automated and leave the core decisions of, okay, this is a new contract. The new contract changes the delay. How does the delay affect our reasoning about the security of the system? Okay, this is the update. And so we are close to there, and yet we're also far from that point because research is hard. But we've built all of this infrastructure with, like, as I said, sophisticated diffing, sophisticated tools to like map the contract system. And also, remember, I told you about this visual thing for smart contract analysis. So the output from Discovery is a JSON that has all of the different smart contracts and their fields and stuff. But it can be hard to see all of the relationships between those smart contracts. So this is where this visual tool comes in. Take the JSON, put it in this visual tool, and you like have a visual map of all of the different contracts, addresses, how they relate to each other, who's the owner, and this is tremendously helpful when you're trying to understand the system. And we also have like templates. So whenever we want to add a new system, and it, for example, is similar to a system that we already have, let's say we add a new system that uses the OP stack, right? We also have it automated in the way that it requires less research work than adding a system that's completely different. So all of this, we like invested really heavily into being able to handle all of those projects that are like now incoming.
Yeah, impressive. And with Discovery, is that also an open source tool? Because I imagine even, say, like funds that are looking at, say they're invested in a pool in Compound or Aave and they want to stay up to date on the changes. I imagine that's something that would be kind of broadly applicable to a lot of teams.
Yeah, so it is open source. One thing to note is that open source doesn't exactly mean usable outside of L2BEAT. So it is open source. At this point, it will be quite hard to use this outside of L2BEAT. We plan to make this a bit easier in the future so it can be run standalone. But right now, even though it's open source, it's kind of focused on our internal use cases.
Okay, well, that seems awesome. And I love just you guys building all of these tools to kind of solve your own needs as you've gone along. And I think probably allowing you guys to stay lean in many respects as well and not have to hire a bajillion researchers to check each of these individually each week.
Yeah, and then, if we were to go this route to like hire a lot of those researchers, we would run into the issue of, like, I remember when we started, what we used to do is actually go to Etherscan, open the smart contract page, and check all of the possible values individually. Like, oh, okay, who's the owner? Okay, so I can click this, open a new tab. You can imagine how much time did that take, right? And like reading the source code on Etherscan is also not the best experience. So right now, if you want to like read the source code, our Discovery tool automatically downloads all of the source code of all of the contracts to the local machine, so you can like browse it in VS Code. So it's a whole different experience of research, right? Than when you're trying to do it manually.
Well, I think we'll use that as a kind of opportunity to come to a wrap for today. Thank you so much for spending so much time, and I think everyone's listening will love to learn more about being a public good company, L2BEAT, the L2 ecosystem pretty broadly. What can people expect from L2BEAT in the next 12 months? You've alluded to some things here, but would also love to just learn from you what we should keep an eye out for.
Yeah, definitely keep an eye out for the different DA solutions. We're also hopefully revisit bridges. We also plan to look at the different fees, both fees from the perspective of users, but also from the perspective of what rollups actually pay to Ethereum. All of this stuff, we'll see how it goes, ambitious plans. And also a year is surprisingly, on the one hand, a lot of time, on the other hand, not a lot of time. We're already in February, right? I hope we're gonna come out of this year even stronger and with even more community support, even more features, and ever as neutral as we are.
All right. Well, thank you so much again for all your time today, and thanks all for listening. Talk soon.
Thank you.